I woke up during my own autopsy and heard them discussing how much my organs would sell for. The cold metal against my back was the first sensation that returned. Then voices, distant and clinical, discussing numbers in thousands. The kidneys alone are worth 80,000 on the European market. Liver's probably good for another 60 if the toxicology comes back clean. I tried to scream, but my throat wouldn't work. My eyelids felt welded shut. I could hear everything but couldn't move, couldn't signal that I was conscious and aware and absolutely not dead. A woman's voice cut through the haze. "Dr. Vance, are we really doing this? This patient came in 3 hours ago with what looked like a routine overdose." The man, presumably Dr. Vance, responded with irritation. "You want to keep working here, you follow protocol. We've got 6 people on the transplant list who will die without organs this month. This junkie threw his life away. At least his death can mean something." The words sliced through my paralyzed mind. Junkie, overdose. They thought I'd tried to kill myself, but I hadn't taken anything. I'd gone to the emergency room because I couldn't breathe, because my chest felt tight and my vision was blurring. The last thing I remembered was a nurse saying something about stabilizing me. "My name is Colin Mercer, and I'm a high school chemistry teacher. 32 years old, no criminal record, no drug history." The tightness in my chest that brought me to the ER had started during my 4th period class while explaining covalent bonds to disinterested sophomores. I'd driven myself to Riverside Memorial Hospital at 3 in the afternoon, checked in at triage, and waited 40 minutes in a plastic chair. When they finally called me back, a nurse took my vitals while I explained my symptoms. Chest pain, difficulty breathing, tingling in my left arm. She'd nodded and told me to wait for the doctor. A man in scrubs came in 15 minutes later, young, maybe late 20s, with a hospital badge that said, Dr. Jeremy Ortiz. He'd listened to my heart, checked my oxygen levels, and said they wanted to run some tests. He'd put an IV in my arm, said it was just fluids and something to help me relax while they waited for test results. That's the last clear memory I have before waking up on this metal table. The voices continued above me. "Heart's in excellent condition. We can harvest everything within the next 20 minutes if you're ready to make the calls." Dr. Vance sounded impatient, like he had somewhere else to be. I focused every ounce of energy on moving something, anything, a finger, a toe, my eyelids. Nothing responded. My body was a prison, and I was trapped inside, listening to strangers plan to dismantle me for profit. The woman spoke again. "What about his family? The paperwork says he has an emergency contact listed. His sister, Rebecca Mercer. Shouldn't we notify her?" Dr. Vance made a dismissive sound. "The death certificate is already filed. Cause of death is fentanyl overdose. Clean, simple, happens every day in this city. His sister will be notified after the fact. Now prep the surgical bay. We're on a timeline here. Fentanyl overdose. They'd falsified my cause of death. This wasn't medical error or misdiagnosis. This was deliberate, organized, criminal. And I was the victim, conscious and aware, but completely helpless." The woman, whose name I still didn't know, hesitated before responding. "Dr. Vance, I've worked with you for 3 years and I've never questioned anything, but this feels different. This patient walked into the ER on his own. He wasn't brought in by paramedics, wasn't found unconscious somewhere. Someone's going to ask questions." The sound of metal instruments being arranged on a tray punctuated her words. Dr. Vance's response was cold and calculated. "That's exactly why we chose him. Middle-aged single male, lives alone, works a job nobody remembers past the school bell. His medical records show a prescription for anxiety medication from 2 years ago. Easy to build a narrative around mental health struggles and substance abuse. The tox screen will show fentanyl in his system because we put it there. Everything is documented. Everything is clean." My mind reeled. They'd researched me, selected me. This wasn't random opportunity. This was premeditated murder disguised as medical procedure. I heard footsteps, then a door opening. A third voice entered the room, older and authoritative. "Vance, what's the status? I've got buyers waiting in 3 different states." Dr. Vance responded immediately, his tone shifting to something more deferential. "Dr. Reeves, we're almost ready, just finalizing the paperwork. Estimated harvest value is between 250 to 300,000 depending on tissue viability." Dr. Reeves, clearly the person in charge, made an approving sound. "Good. The heart's already promised to a patient in Denver. They're paying premium for fast delivery. Kidneys are going to Seattle and Miami. Liver's staying local. We need to move quickly before the body starts degrading. Body. That's what I was to them. Not a person, not a patient, not Colin Mercer who spent his weekends grading papers and his summers hiking in the mountains. Just a body, a collection of harvestable organs worth hundreds of thousands of dollars on an illegal medical market. The woman spoke up again, her voice strained. Dr. Reeves, I need to express my concerns about this case. The patient presented with cardiac symptoms, not overdose indicators. We're falsifying records and that puts all of us at risk. There was a long pause before Dr. Reeves responded. Angela, you've been with us since the beginning. You understand how this works. We save lives, real lives, people who've been on transplant lists for years, watching their organs fail while bureaucracy and red tape prevent them from getting help. Yes, we operate outside conventional channels. Yes, we make decisions that others might question, but we're not villains. We're pragmatists working in a broken system. Angela's response was barely audible. He might have a family, a girlfriend, friends who'll notice he's gone. Dr. Reeves's tone hardened. Everyone dies, Angela. Some deaths just happen to serve a greater purpose. Now, are you going to assist with this procedure or do I need to find someone else? The silence stretched long enough that I thought Angela might refuse. Then I heard her footsteps moving away from the table. I'll prep the instruments. Dr. Reeves addressed Dr. Vance. Let's begin. Standard protocol. Document everything as emergency intervention for overdose victim. Time of death was 1823. We're simply harvesting organs from a deceased donor. Dr. Vance acknowledged, and I heard him moving around the table. I felt pressure on my abdomen, a hand pressing against my skin. Starting initial incision in 3, 2, I screamed, or tried to scream. What came out was a strangled groan, barely audible but real. My throat worked. Sound emerged. Everyone froze. Did you hear that? Angela's voice was sharp with panic. Dr. Vance's hands pulled away from my stomach. It's just gas release. Happens sometimes with fresh bodies. But I groaned again, focusing everything I had on that small victory. Another sound, longer and louder. That's not gas release. That's vocalization. Angela's footsteps rushed toward the table. I felt fingers on my neck, pressing against my carotid artery. He has a pulse, a strong pulse. This patient is alive. The room erupted into chaos. Dr. Vance was swearing. Dr. Reeves was demanding to know what happened, and Angela was yelling for someone to call a code. I felt my body being lifted, moved. The cold metal table replaced by something softer. Voices overlapped, instructions and accusations and panic. Someone was shouting about paralytic drugs and dosage errors. Another voice was saying they needed to intubate me immediately. I felt a mask pressed over my face, oxygen flooding my lungs. My eyelids finally cracked open, just slits, but enough to see harsh fluorescent lights above me and figures in surgical gowns hovering close. Angela's face appeared in my limited field of vision, her eyes wide with horror and something else. Guilt, maybe, or fear of what I'd heard. The next hours were fragmented. I drifted in and out of consciousness, my body fighting against whatever drugs they'd used to paralyze me. When I finally woke up fully, I was in a private hospital room with an IV in my arm and monitors beeping around me. A nurse I'd never seen before was checking the machines. She noticed my eyes open and smiled with professional warmth. Mr. Mercer, you're awake. How are you feeling? My throat was raw, but I managed to speak. What happened? She consulted a chart. You came into the ER with cardiac symptoms. Turns out you had a severe reaction to a medication. You went into cardiac arrest, but we managed to resuscitate you. You've been unconscious for about 18 hours. Cardiac arrest. Resuscitation. The official story was already being constructed. No mention of autopsies or organ harvesting or the conversation I'd heard. I asked where Dr. Vance was and the nurse looked confused. I'm not familiar with that doctor. Your attending physician is Dr. Sarah Kim. She'll be by to check on you later. I spent the next 3 days in that hospital room, supposedly recovering from a cardiac event that never actually happened. Different nurses and doctors came through, all of them pleasant and professional, none of them the people I'd heard in that room. I asked repeatedly to see Dr. Vance or Dr. Reeves. Staff looked confused each time, checking databases and schedules, telling me no one by those names worked at Riverside Memorial. Angela was nowhere to be found either. On the third day, my sister Rebecca showed up. her face pale with worry. "Colin, oh my God, they called me the day you were admitted and said you'd had a heart attack. Why didn't you tell me you were having heart problems?" I grabbed her hand, my grip urgent. "Becca, I need you to listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, but I need you to believe me." I told her everything. The autopsy table, the conversations about selling my organs, the falsified death certificate, the names of the doctors involved. Rebecca listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief to something harder. When I finished, she pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." I stopped her. "And tell them what? That doctors tried to harvest my organs while I was still alive? We need proof, documentation, something concrete they can't deny or explain away." Rebecca lowered the phone. "What do you want to do?" I'd been thinking about nothing else for 3 days. "We need to find out who these people really are and what they're running. This isn't the first time they've done this. Dr. Reeves said buyers were waiting. That means they have established connections, regular operations. We need to expose the entire network." Rebecca stared at me. "You want to investigate a criminal organ trafficking ring from your hospital bed?" I met her eyes. "I want to make sure they can't do this to anyone else." My sister had always been the pragmatic one, the lawyer who dealt in evidence and facts. She thought for a moment before nodding. "Okay, but we do this smart. No cowboy heroics." Rebecca brought me my laptop, and we started researching. Riverside Memorial Hospital had a clean public record, good ratings, no major scandals. But when we dug deeper into medical staff, things got interesting. There was no Dr. Vance or Dr. Reeves listed in their employee directory. We expanded the search to include contractors, visiting specialists, and surgical consultants. Nothing. Rebecca pulled up the hospital's board of directors and administrative staff. What if they're not using their real names? What if Vance and Reeves are aliases they use for these operations? I thought about the voices, trying to remember distinguishing features. The woman, Angela, she said she'd worked with Vance for 3 years. That means she's not random staff. She's part of the core operation. Rebecca made notes. "We need to get access to your medical records from that day. See who was actually treating you, what the official documentation says." She made some calls, leveraging her legal credentials to request my records. When they arrived by email the next day, we read through them with growing unease. According to the official record, I'd been admitted to the ER at 15:43 with chest pain and difficulty breathing. I'd been examined by Dr. Jeremy Ortiz, the young doctor I remembered. He'd ordered an EKG and blood work. At 17:38, I'd experienced sudden cardiac arrest, likely triggered by an adverse drug interaction between my anxiety medication and an over-the-counter supplement I'd supposedly taken that morning. I'd never taken any supplement. The medical team had performed CPR and used a defibrillator. I'd been unresponsive for several minutes before my heart restarted. I'd been moved to intensive care for monitoring. At no point did the records mention an autopsy. Dr. Vance, Dr. Reeves, or Angela. The timeline aligned with what I remembered up until Dr. Ortiz gave me the IV, then jumped forward to me waking up 18 hours later. Everything in between had been erased. Rebecca pointed at the screen. "They've sanitized the records, but they can't erase everything. Security cameras, staff schedules, pharmaceutical logs. Somewhere there's evidence. I was discharged on day 5 with instructions to follow up with a cardiologist and prescriptions for medications I didn't need. Rebecca picked me up and drove me to her apartment instead of my house. "You're staying with me until we figure this out. If they know you heard them, you might not be safe." I'd been thinking the same thing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing Dr. Reeves's voice explaining how I'd been selected because I was forgettable, convenient. The violation of it went beyond physical danger. They'd looked at my life and decided it was worthless enough to end for profit. Rebecca was already working her contacts. She'd reached out to an investigative journalist she knew, a woman named Vanessa Torres, who specialized in medical fraud cases. Vanessa agreed to meet us the next morning at a coffee shop downtown. She listened to my story with a recorder running, asking pointed questions about timing, exact phrases I'd heard, names and descriptions. When I finished, she sat back and studied me. "Mr. Mercer, what you're describing is organ trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, and systemic fraud. If even half of this is true, it's massive. But I need to warn you, These kinds of operations are protected by people with serious power. Vanessa pulled out her own laptop and showed us research she'd been compiling over the past 2 years. There's been a pattern of suspicious deaths at several hospitals in this region. Patients who come in with treatable conditions die unexpectedly and become organ donors. The transplant success rate for organs from these hospitals is abnormally high, which suggests the organs are harvested from healthier donors than typically available. Rebecca leaned forward. How many deaths are we talking about? Vanessa scrolled through her files. 63 over the past 4 years across 5 hospitals. All ruled natural deaths or overdoses. All resulted in organ donations that were processed through apparently legitimate channels. But when I started mapping the receiving patients, I found connections. Many of them were wealthy individuals who'd been denied placement on official transplant lists due to age or medical complications. They were getting organs through a private network that bypassed the national registry. I felt sick. How is that possible? How do they hide that many deaths? Vanessa explained the mechanics. Organ procurement organizations are supposed to be independent, but there's money and pressure everywhere. A doctor declares a patient dead, files the paperwork, and the OPO coordinates with transplant centers. If the doctor is corrupt and the OPO is either corrupt or simply not asking the right questions, organs can be harvested and distributed without proper oversight. The receiving transplant centers might not even know the organs were obtained illegally. They're just told a donor became available. Rebecca was taking notes. We need to prove the connection, link these deaths to specific individuals, and show the financial trail. Vanessa nodded. That's where it gets dangerous. I've been investigating this for 2 years, and I've had my car vandalized, my apartment broken into, and anonymous threats sent to my editor. Whoever's running this operation has resources and reach. I met her eyes. They tried to cut me open while I was still alive. I'm already in danger. At least now I can fight back. We spent the next 2 weeks building a case. Vanessa used her journalism credentials to request public records, death certificates, and autopsy reports. Rebecca filed legal requests for hospital documentation under various pretexts. I did something more direct. I went back to Riverside Memorial Hospital, not as a patient, but as a visitor. I walked through the halls, studying faces, looking for anyone I recognized from that room. On my 3rd visit, I saw her, Angela. She was walking through the main corridor in scrubs, her hospital badge identifying her as Angela Brennan, RN, Surgical Services. I followed at a distance as she made her way to the cafeteria. She sat alone at a corner table with a sandwich and a coffee, scrolling through her phone. I approached carefully, sitting down across from her before she could react. Angela Brennan, we need to talk. Her face went white. She started to stand, but I spoke quickly. I remember everything. The autopsy room, Dr. Vance, Dr. Reeves, the conversation about selling my organs. I need to know who they really are. Angela's hands were shaking. You need to leave. You don't understand what you're involved in. I kept my voice low but firm. Then help me understand. You questioned them that day. You said it felt wrong. I heard you. She glanced around the cafeteria, checking who might be watching. I can't talk here. Meet me tonight, 8 o'clock, at the parking structure on 4th Street, top level. Come alone or I won't show. She stood and left, without waiting for a response. I called Rebecca immediately and told her about the meeting. She insisted on coming with me, staying hidden nearby in case it was a trap. That night, we drove to the parking structure separately. Rebecca parked on the 3rd level while I continued to the top. The top level was empty except for one car, a gray sedan. Angela stood beside it, wrapped in a coat despite the mild evening. I parked and got out, approaching slowly. Thank you for meeting me. She cut me off. I'm risking everything by being here. If they find out I'm talking to you, I'm dead. I asked who they were. Angela took a shaky breath. Dr. Reeves is really Dr. Marcus Reeves, but that's not who he actually is. He's using the identity of a surgeon who died 15 years ago. His real name is James Sutherland. He's been running this operation for at least a decade, maybe longer. Dr. Vance is Thomas Vance, an actual surgeon who lost his medical license in another state for ethics violations. He works under Reeves. There are others. At least 5 doctors across 3 hospitals, plus nurses, OPO coordinators, and administrative staff. They select patients who fit certain criteria, uninsured or underinsured, minimal family connections, histories that can be manipulated to explain sudden death. They induce cardiac arrest using drugs that metabolize quickly, declare the patients dead, and harvest organs before anyone can question it. I felt cold. How many people have they killed? Angela's voice broke. I don't know exact numbers. Dozens at least. Maybe more. I didn't know what I was part of when I started. I thought we were just expediting paperwork for legitimate organ donations. By the time I understood, I was already complicit. I asked why she stayed involved. Angela's expression hardened. Because James Sutherland has evidence of my participation in early procedures. If I talk, he'll make sure I go down for murder. He has videos, documents, all of it showing me assisting with harvests. I'm trapped. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. Tell me everything. Names, locations, how they select patients, where the money goes. Give me enough to bring them down, and I'll make sure the prosecutor knows you cooperated. Angela stared at the phone. If I do this, I can't go back. They'll know it was me. I met her eyes. If you don't do this, they'll keep killing people. How long before you can't live with that anymore? Angela was crying now, but she nodded. She spent the next 40 minutes describing the entire operation in detail. The network of corrupt medical professionals, the brokers who connected them with wealthy buyers, the shell companies used to move money. She named names, gave addresses, described procedures. When she finished, I had enough to destroy them. The next morning, Rebecca and I took everything to the FBI. Not local police who might have connections to the hospital, but federal agents who specialized in organized crime. Special Agent Linda Kowalski listened to my story, reviewed Vanessa's research, and heard Angela's recorded testimony. Her expression grew darker with each revelation. Mr. Mercer, what you're describing is one of the largest illegal organ trafficking operations we've seen in the continental United States. If your evidence holds up, we're looking at dozens of arrests and multiple life sentences. She assigned a team of agents to investigate immediately. They put Angela in protective custody and started building federal cases against everyone involved. 2 weeks later, the FBI raided Riverside Memorial Hospital, along with 2 other facilities. They arrested James Sutherland, Thomas Vance, and 9 other medical professionals. They seized computers, financial records, and medical files. They exhumed bodies of suspected victims to verify causes of death. The investigation uncovered exactly what Angela had described. A network that had been operating for 12 years, killing at least 87 people and harvesting their organs for illegal sale. The case made national news. Vanessa Torres broke the story with documentation that won her a Pulitzer Prize. The trial took 18 months. I testified, describing in detail what I'd heard on that autopsy table. Angela testified, providing insider knowledge of operations and procedures. Forensic accountants tracked money through offshore accounts and shell companies. The jury convicted James Sutherland on 43 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and fraud. He got 43 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. Thomas Vance got 35 life sentences. Other participants received sentences ranging from 15 to 50 years. Angela Brennan, in exchange for her testimony, received 7 years with credit for time served and cooperation. The scandal destroyed Riverside Memorial Hospital's reputation. They faced hundreds of civil lawsuits from families of victims. The hospital filed for bankruptcy within a year. New federal regulations were implemented to prevent similar operations, including mandatory independent verification of death declarations and enhanced oversight of organ procurement organizations. I went back to teaching chemistry to disinterested sophomores, but I wasn't the same person who'd walked into that ER with chest tightness. I started a foundation to support families of organ trafficking victims, working with Rebecca to advocate for reform. I gave speeches at medical conferences about the importance of ethical oversight. Every day, I carried the weight of knowing I'd survived something that 87 other people hadn't. Survivor's guilt mixed with purpose. On the 1-year anniversary of waking up on that autopsy table, I visited Angela Brennan in prison. She'd lost weight and looked older, worn down by incarceration and guilt. We talked for an hour about responsibility and redemption. She told me she thought about the victims every day, people she'd helped kill through her silence and complicity. I told her that her testimony had saved future lives, that choosing to speak up had mattered. We both knew it didn't balance the scales, but it was something. As I left the prison and drove home through afternoon traffic, I thought about Dr. Reeves, James Sutherland, rotting in a maximum security facility, his organ trafficking empire dismantled, his fortune seized, his name synonymous with medical horror. Justice had been served, but the people he'd killed remained dead, their families forever marked by loss. I'd gotten a second chance they'd never have, and I spent every day trying to make it mean something more than just survival. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.